Go over the debt clock. So I went over this about 4.5 years ago in early 2021, and back then the U.S. national debt stood around 28 trillion and some change. I mean, it's not really change, but you get what I'm saying. It was over about in the 28 trillion range. The deficit was around 3.2 trillion, but that was reflective of the COVID spending. So now, as you can see, we're 37.5 trillion, and the 1.9 trillion deficit that we're running. Um, so, we are in pretty bad financial shape. Let's be honest. We're not gonna sugarcoat that, but you know, the debt is considerably higher than 4.5 years ago, though the deficit has gone down. But again, as I had said, the deficit back then was only because of the COVID spending. So this deficit is still relatively high to what, we were in over 25 years ago. When we were running surpluses during the later years of the Clinton administration. So if we really want to get our country back in financial shape, it's going to be a considerable journey, and it's definitely going to be a rough time going forward if we were to start today, for example. And I want to talk about this specifically because of the government shutdown and, that the government has ran out of money. And when we really look back, when I did the video 4.5 years ago, we were looking at the situation bad back then. And it's even worse than it is. It was worse today, of course, than it was back then, because a lot of the issues that we had, specifically during that time in 2021, because of the COVID spending and the shutdowns from 2020. So with the deficit still remaining as high as it is, and the inability to be able to close that, it's going to be a considerable problem going forward. And, we see the Doge clock here, some of the spending that was, the spending that was cut. We're not going to go over that, really. I think the biggest factors that we need to look at are right here, the largest constraints on the budget. Medicare and Medicaid at 1.7 trillion. I'm not really going to, critique that. I do believe that healthcare is a right, and I do think that healthcare in the United States is way underfunded. So, unfortunately, we don't have the money to expand that. Well, maybe at one point we did, but that's a whole other story. We've wasted it away with incompetent politicians, and endless wars have wasted away our financial status in this country. But that's another story for another time. So here we go. Of course, Social Security, 1.545 trillion. That is something that can't be touched. Instituted during the FDR administration. We have defense and war with 930 billion, $580 million. Considering the threats that exist today in the world, wouldn't even matter. Cutting it 100, even 200 billion, it wouldn't do it. It wouldn't even knock a dent into the deficit. So, there's nothing we could do there. It's definitely important to look at the interest on the debt, which is now over $1 trillion. So servicing debt has become more expensive. It's more expensive than it ever has been. So, when we look at these numbers, all we can do is just, look at them, essentially, because we rely on our politicians to balance the budget and to prevent the mess that we see on the screen. And, considering that they have done a terrible job at maintaining the financial health of our nation, and, the both sides are to blame in their own ways, it is theoretically possible to balance the deficit and then over the long term pay down the debt. I mean, it's possible for anybody, even an individual, any nation as well. And we don't even have the highest debt to GDP ratio in the world. there's other countries, especially well-developed nations such as Japan, that have a higher debt to GDP ratio. But I mean, the austerity measures required to do such a thing would the United States and its people would not be able to handle that. We're not used to such drastic cuts. I mean, maybe if something like this, if the situation, whether it's comparable situations in places such as Argentina, where austerity measures are kind of become kind of like a way of life, essentially, unfortunately. But this, in the United States, it would lead to catastrophic consequences. So, though while possible, it's highly unlikely that austerity measures would ever be implemented. But I just wanted to give kind of like an overview of our status in regard to the United States financial health, where we stand compared to the last time I did this video 4 years ago. And this is pretty much it. Anything that comes up or anything changes, I will definitely make another video about it. But for now, that's that.